Welcome to Silicon Valley Successes. On today's show, we have Paula Matasanciera, who has been a professional in the marketing field for the past 20 years. She has extensive experience in teaching, mentoring, and supervising teams effectively to achieving projects' goals. And today, we'll find out why she is known as the MacGyver of Marketing here in Silicon Valley. Stay tuned. Paula, thank you for taking the time today to be on Silicon Valley Successes.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
So, Paula, tell us a little bit about your background in marketing.
Okay, well, it spans a couple of decades. I started off, actually in a little backstory. When I went to college, I decided that I was not going to leave New York. I grew up in New York, from Jamaica originally, but grew up in New York. And I realized that New York was kind of the center of business, capital, central, everything. And so I decided to stay there while I was working school and just started working for, all the majors. And it was in that time, I'd never say to people that, oh, it was after I graduated from college, because I had some really solid job opportunities during college. I worked for Viacom when they started their licensing, syndication, and Westinghouse broadcasting on the radio, and I got a chance to work for Griffin Bacall when they were around, big advertising agency on the Asbro account, and all before I really graduated from college. So it's been going for quite a while. And so I really prided myself in knowing a couple of different areas in marketing, because once I got out there, I wanted to really have that bandwidth to make a decision about where I was going to go, or even be able to advise my teams as I was working with them. So I started off in advertising. It was wonderful, because it was at that time when companies were spending a lot of money in marketing, so you could really stretch and do a lot, And interestingly enough, I was working with a lot of startups, like Saturn was starting up at the time. Subway was just becoming a franchise at the time, and John Deere lawnmower products had never really done extensive marketing and decided that they really needed to be in the marketplace with the Japanese competition coming. So always loved working with smaller companies, things that were starting, and so kind of slowly drifted into this. And since then, I've started a lot of businesses, and now I'm here with you, hanging out, sharing my info, in a nutshell, right? That's me in a nutshell.
So then, how did you get the nickname MacGyver of Marketing here in Silicon Valley?
That was one of my clients, actually. That's independent of me. So, I know nowadays the big thing to do is just throw a budget at something, and I'm just not a fan of that. I really pride myself in understanding that when I work with a small business, those budgets are really important, and they count. It's not like when you're working with a large company, they can burn through maybe $500,000 to test something. But with a small company, they need to be a little bit more decisive about things, and they need you to come in and think your way through it thoughtfully. I'm a marketing person after all, so I should be able to creatively do something. So his joke was that, sometimes you'll spit glue things together and come out with the same thing that the other guy spent a lot of money on. And so I like to think my way through it, because I'd like to make sure that I allocate the budget appropriately. There's some things that we should just sit and talk through and come up with great solutions instead of just spending.
So then, could you talk a little bit about when you decide to work with a company, an early stage company, kind of that initial conversation about how you'd work through a marketing plan?
Okay, well, the big challenge working with a startup is they have a few challenges. They're new to the marketplace, so understanding who their competition is really a big one. You know, you can research it to death, but nothing beats actually being in the marketplace and having the experience and going through it. And so, you know, they don't have that experience just yet. They don't have direct experience with their target audience just yet. So it's really going through and narrowing that down. And again, budget to me is everything. So again, we're not talking about throwing the kitchen sink at everything, but let's sit down and strategically lay out a plan because, you know, sadly, marketing is one of those things where it just doesn't happen. It's not like accounting. You know, finance is very defined, right? 1 + 1 = 2. Marketing is about relationships, you know? It's like that best friend, right? It's like you got to court the relationship over a period of time. And yes, you can maybe get the target audience to do certain things for a short spurt, but long term, it's about relationship building, and relationship building doesn't happen overnight. That's a challenging thing for startups because I think now they kind of want it yesterday. I want it now. You know, I want to have all these friends that would love me. So that's not how it works, you know? It's like there's so much else that needs to be worked out. So to me, that's a big challenge, understanding the competition and understanding the target audience and understanding that we shouldn't just throw money at something, you know?
So then what has changed in the marketing industry over the last few years? You talked about in college, these big budgets versus now. So how has the market industry changed, and how has maybe the methods used changed as well?
Well, it's kind of exciting. To me, if you're starting right now, it's exciting, right? Because you have so much access. As a small company coming up against a big guy, you have to do a lot in order to compete 20, 30 years ago. But now you have YouTube, you have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have LinkedIn, you have your own website, so you can have that digital face to the world. And overnight, people have access to you. You know, so having that access is what's, I think, has changed so drastically. I mean, I remember at one point, it's like, you know, to get on ABC during prime time, you know, you're looking at $70, $90, $100,000, and how does a little guy compete with that, you know? And again, remember, when you're doing advertising, it's about repetition. So it's not just spending 100,000 plus, let's say, and miracles happen overnight. You got to do that a couple of times. That budget is challenging to you know, break through, right? Now there's a lot of access, so it's really exciting. But there's still some challenges even with that, right? Because you don't just put up a digital face and people find you. Just like when you had a store with no internet back 30, 40 years ago, you don't just open your storefront and people find you. Same thing, you know? So I think that's the big challenge right now, but still kind of exciting to have that access because it's about how you work it, right? How you work your budget, how you work your access. You know, you have access to the party, how do you show up? Do you show up in a paper bag? That might not be a good idea. Or do you really show up and make sure your brand looks a certain way, your messaging is ready to go? And then, you know, we could do all of that miracles and wonderful things, but then if your operations isn't set up to accept all of those eyeballs and those inquiries, we're still having a little bit of a problem. So marketing and operations is very tightly wedged to each other as well. So that's another challenge, I think, come to think of it, for a startup, because they haven't worked out their kinks yet on the operations side, right? So
that's interesting. Normally I've heard sales and marketing, that relationship. I haven't heard the marketing operations relationship.
Oh yeah. It's like, you know, I'm gonna date myself now by like sharing the Cabbage Patch Dolls scenario, but that was a really ugly situation because the marketing end was on point. They did miraculous things. Parents were revved up and going to the stores and getting into fights on television. But then the issue was once they got to the store, they didn't have enough product. So marketing and operations hadn't spoken to each other. That scenario hadn't even been hit. And surprisingly, I mean, it happens to large companies, just as it happens to small companies, you know? So it's, and by the way, I know that you said marketing and sales and that relationship. I have such issues with that because sales is part of marketing, you know? It's not a separate entity. It all speaks together very holistically. You can't have one without the other necessarily, you know? So, yeah.
Now, is that true with only startups or big companies, or every stage company, sales and marketing, operations, all intertwined?
Well, you're getting you have a different challenge when you're talking about someone who's more seasoned, right? Because now they understand their clients. They understand their budgets. They've had some experience being out there in the marketplace and having the ability to just hear the clients. Clients will tell you what they like and what they dislike. All you have to do is listen and ask. Startups don't yet have that access, right? Because they're just getting out there. Without realizing it, people, you know, clients who have been around for a while, who are far ahead in the growth cycle, sometimes they're seeing all of that, but they don't realize that they have the data. And until I sit down with them and get them to dialogue, it's like the mad genius in the action movie, just get them to dialogue. They share so much that they didn't realize was very relevant. And so gathering that information from them, wonderful. It makes it a lot easier for someone like myself. With a startup company, you're having to go out and do some deep research. Maybe even hit the pavements, get out there a little bit, do some research, bring focus groups in, making sure that you're really getting the real story. Also going out there and making some mistakes and understanding that it's okay, we're gonna have to make some mistakes in order to gather the information and maybe make some changes in marketing and sometimes in the product and the service offering as well. So I think marketing is pretty much the same all the way through, but the approach is going to be very different, and the access that you have to information. One has information already gathered, they might not understand that they have that, and startups don't yet have the real deal, let's say, you know?
And then a company, say they want to start marketing.
Yeah.
When should they hire a CMO? When should they have an offsite digital marketing team? Can you talk a little bit about those options?
Well, let me start off by differentiating between the two. So I run an offsite marketing department, as you know, and it's a term that I haven't heard before. Now that I've said it out loud, someone heard me and maybe replicating me right now, but you know, it's all good. That's literally having a team there. We create the strategy, we manage the day-to-day marketing. We will sit down with the teams, making sure that we're on point as far as brand and messaging, and repeat every quarter, let's say. A CMO, as Chief Marketing Officer, is primarily on the strategy side. And actually, for some companies, it's a little, it's a mixed bag, let's say, because sometimes you'll go into a company and they're really more of a sales manager. They're more of a sales director doing a bit of marketing, a little bit of promo here to push the sales efforts, but not really looking at an overall strategy. For me, I love when my owners, you know, bring in their reports from the accountant, have the bookkeeper there, whoever's looking at their numbers. The sales team may come in and sit with me as well. I love to hear the entire story because I can gather that, create an actual strategy so that we can put together an actual plan on a month-to-month basis and execute that for my owners, and then apply and, you know, make some revisions and repeat, you know? So we would be what if you, let's say you're a small company and you literally have the money to staff an entire marketing team in your, within your business. But we do that but offsite, so we're doing it for a few people. So we bring the strategy, but we bring in the management as well. And a CMO would be more on the strategic end primarily.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's some amazing information. To find out more information, visit our website at siliconvalleysuccesses.com. Once again, that's siliconvalleysuccesses.com, where we have up-to-date information that you might not catch here on the show that we add because we know will benefit you at home. So let's get back to Paula. Paula, how is technology changing marketing? For example, artificial intelligence. Does that have any type of impact?
It's a scary one. It's fun. It's a wonderful time, by the way, because you can really bring big data to even small companies now. So that's wonderful to be able to gather that much information. So, but it's a little scary as well because it's not really, there are no real laws around it. You know, I'll give you an example. The other day I'm with a client and we're having a great conversation about next steps. Fourth quarter is planning period for all my clients for 2020. I'm like, oh, let me pop onto my laptop and just gather a little bit of information for our discussion here. And the search was already there based on our conversation. And so, you know, these things are there. We're gathering information. There's no real laws around it. I guess you can use it for good or for not so good, you know. But it's an interesting time because to be able to react that quickly to a client and with the analytics that were being offered, even at the small level, even at the startup level, is exciting. But definitely technology is pushing us in an interesting direction. It also allows us to do wonderful things like automated marketing, which is one of my favorites. You know, someone comes to your website and you have preset messages already set up. And, you know, now you're following them on a weekly basis, on a quarterly basis, just simply reminding them that you're there and the services that you can offer them, right? Because again, marketing is about repeating, and repeating again. So it's, you know, there's a lot of fun things out there, but a little scary, you know, because technology is pushing us in an interesting direction. But analytics that we can gather, automated marketing, the SEO items that we can put in the background so that people can find you, effectively search for you. To be able to narrow down an ad online specifically, very granularly to that group, that target group that you want, breaking it down by even their birthdays, breaking it down by zip code, breaking it down by books that they read, book clubs that they're part of, running groups that they're part of. I mean, that's exciting to be able to get to eliminate the rest of the world and just speak to your audience. Exciting.
That's incredible that it could be narrowed down to the books that you read and the hobbies that you have. That's because when I think of creating the idea persona, it's an age range, guy or girl, and maybe country. Everything else, pretty nitty gritty there.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the way it used to be, right? You know, adults, male, female, age range. Interesting thing about the demographics right now, before we used to do things like 25 to 54. That's a bit archaic now because that's too wide. Because the mindset is 25 and 54, they're not in the same ballpark. So now you have to break down your groupings to smaller and smaller groupings to target your audiences more effectively. So yeah, you can narrow it down very granularly.
And going back to discussion of a CMO on a team, how involved does the CEO, the head of the company, how involved is he with the sales and marketing department? Is he really hands-on for a startup, early stage company, or is he more sitting in the background, kind of looking to see what's going on?
Well, mixed bag, right? I mean, because for me, marketing isn't a ditto situation. When you create a strategy for a client, it's really more about the client and also, surprisingly, their personality. you don't want to force a square into a circle. You got to go with what makes sense for them. Some CEOs are very hands-on. They like to be very involved. They want to know what's going on, super stoked, super excited about everything. Some CEOs want to step back a little bit. They want to be at the meetings, but they really rely on their teams. They've chosen well, and they want their teams to do and report back to them as far as any kind of numbers are concerned and how things are going. But it really depends. But that early stage, especially the way I work with my clients, I do prefer to speak to my senior level staff primarily and only, because we can have very intimate conversations about how things are going. Do you necessarily want all the staff to know how the budget's going, how the revenue growth's going, about that, maybe that one employee who isn't fantastic, about that one employee who isn't fantastic, and we need to get rid of them because they've become a gatekeeper and they're not converting the way they should. So now we can have very open discussions about, okay, well, great guy, but I think he would be better placed for the brand in this area versus speaking to the clients directly, let's say. All of that matters. And so, yeah, sometimes it has to be a little bit of a closed door initially until we figure out direction. But again, depends on the CEO and their personality and, do I want my staff in? Do I want them to be part of it? And I go with that because at the end of the day, when I step away, the person who's making the decision is really the CEO, the senior level staff. I'm there as an advisor. I can advise them all day long, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to accept our recommendations or not, so.
A company that you've worked with or advised,
Yeah.
do you have any stories that you like to share with us about either mishaps or successes or something that would make us smile?
Well, all right, so the biggest mishap that I've ever, and they're wonderful, by the way. I'm not even going to use their names. I'm not doing it. But wonderful, wonderful company. They do yoga and meditation retreats internationally. And it was fantastic because I was managing the entire team internationally. So we're in about 5 countries. And we were working with a legitimate, Himalayan trained guru. I mean, the man was just stellar, just wonderful. So great selling point for us. But sometimes you advise clients not to do certain things and they do it anyway. They went ahead and decided that they were going to do well, everyone's doing AdWords, so we're going to do AdWords also. Paula doesn't know. It's just everyone does AdWords. And so they spent a good $25,000 on AdWords. And then when I figured out that they were spending on AdWords, it's like, okay, so all the calls have been going, like who's been picking up these calls, who's been responding to the clients. They're like, oh, yeah, no one. So AdWords is phenomenal, by the way. We got a lot of inquiries. We've got a lot of calls. But no one actually followed up with the clients. And so that was $25,000 wasted. And nowadays, you don't get a second chance with the clients. They get excited. They want an answer now. They want to call. They want to speak to someone. They're ready with their credit card to sign up for that next big meditation retreat. No one. But when we finally figured out where they'd sent the phone call, there was a lot of phone calls. So it's like, but it's like, great, maybe we'll reset. So for me, sometimes we can't do this because the operations isn't set up. We don't have anyone trained that is trusted in that area yet to tackle these phone calls. The product is too intimate right now to do an overseas pickup on it. We need someone in-house ready to go. And sometimes, it's okay just to put that budget aside and put it somewhere else that's more effective. And then maybe once we get more structured, we'll do it 2 years from now. But they were gung-ho and ready. So that was $25,000 burnt. Let's just put that money on the table and burn it. So that was a really bad one. Wonderful client, though. I mean, I still have lunch with them till this day whenever they're in town. But my best story is a client that I've had for a good 7 years now. And they're a property management company. Not a super sexy product line. I mean, they take care of commercial buildings in San Francisco and Palo Alto, San Jose, Walnut Creek, Oakland. And, but, you know, once I started speaking to their clients, and they're a 50-plus-year-old business, and which is a huge thing in today's environment. Their clients just love them. I mean, it was like a love story. Like, wait, what's happening? Like, but it's just property management. Like, why do you love them so much? You know? And so it was, to me, because of the way the owners ran their business, the service level that they gave. They didn't realize that they had all of this great data for me. And so I was able to increase the company from 7 employees. They now have 23 employees, like after 5 years, and they grew into their Oakland and San Jose offices. And surprisingly, it was simple because people think that marketing is complicated. When they came into me, all they said was the following: you know, we're just embarrassed by our brand, and we don't tell anyone that we have a website because it's horrible. And we don't like the logo, we don't like anything. And now we're converting some much larger clients, and we just don't have the look and feel. We don't have the sophistication. So sometimes clients come in and they're not saying, bring me more clients. Sometimes they come in and say, we're getting the clients, but we're a little embarrassed by, you know, the way we look, you know, and so can you dress us up? But, you know, once they got me in there, it was like, okay, there are all these other things that we can do. So that was exciting, coming in and helping them with their pitches and just everything.
And Paula, if anyone wants to find out more information about you, what's the best way to go about doing that?
I would say hit my website, www.powermarketingsf.com. Hit the contact button, and it will just ask for Paula. It will come to me. Or they can hit our pages there and read about our services. We do, like I said, strategic marketing planning, day-to-day marketing, and we can coach our clients as well if they need their teams to execute it. So,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Paula, thank you for taking the time today to be on Silicon Valley Successes.
Okay.
And next week we'll have Shamil, who is a patent expert that will give everyone at home some advice on how to protect their IP, what they should be thinking about when they're making their moat, and much, much more. So stay tuned for next week's episode of Silicon Valley Successes.
Thank you from all of us at Silicon Valley Successes. We hope you found the information presented today useful in your path to success. For further information on accessing the resources in Silicon Valley, you may visit us on the web at siliconvalleysuccesses.com, on Facebook, and YouTube. Thank you. And remember, we want to help you in your journey to become the next success.